talk about security. So the world in which we are living right now, that is the where we are having systems that allow multiple users to access our computer. Okay, we are having distributed file system that allow many users to access each other files. Even in a single computer, we are having multiple processes which will actually access each other resources. Okay, so in this world, when we are sharing the things, when the resources are shared, when the information is shared, when we are having internet which allow communication over public lines and even the wireless lines, okay, which can be tapped, which can be malicious, or any sorts of thing can be done. So our information is out there in the wild, okay, it is roaming here and there. So it is very important to have some security mechanism to secure our information, or secure our data, or secure our resources, right? So in today's world, this is really a challenging task to have. And when we talk about security, how can you protect your system? So there is one notion of physical protection, which says that just keep your system into a vault with guards outside, and there should be no connection of the system from the outside world. No internet connection, no LAN cables, no Wi-Fi connectivity, no USB port connected to the system, and all those things. Okay, then you can achieve physical protection. But what do you think? Is it a practical solution? If we are having such a system with no connection at all from the outside world, that system is actually of no use for us, right? So therefore, software protection is the main practical thing that we are, we are concerned with actually. And when we talk about software protection, we will say that the system, our physical system, is out there. Okay, we will connect it through public lines. We will, have access, different websites. We will do file sharing. We will do everything, but with software protection, which means we will use some sort of mechanism which will allow us to protect our information, to protect the resource, to protect the files. Okay, and those mechanisms, so we will see in today's lecture what are those mechanisms. Some of them are authentication, which is a very commonly used mechanism in each and every field, whether it is a website, whether it is a server, whether it is your system or anything, right? So authentication is very primitive security mechanism which is used worldwide. Then we have seen access list, which will actually somehow protect our files from unauthorized access or unauthorized modifications. We have some other mechanism like encryption and all that you will learn in detail in your next semester in computer security course. So encryption is a way in which even if the information is with a adversary, he or she cannot read it, okay, or or she cannot get the proper information which is there in the message. Okay, so these are the ways in which we can protect our system. Okay, so without physical protection, software does no good. So we will concern ourselves only with the software protection, right? Okay, so there are mechanisms that we can use to protect our system, and these mechanisms are called basic primitives. They will let us know how something is done. So for example, we have already learned about access list. We have learned about capability list, right? There are some mechanisms, like authentication mechanism, which will let us know how this authentication can be done. Okay, there are some ways of encryption, how to encrypt the data. Okay, how the message can be, or how the text can be encrypted. So mechanism is the primitives which are available, which will show that how this thing can be done. What do we mean by policy? How these primitives are used to implement the functionality. Okay, so suppose we want to achieve confidentiality. So how confidentiality can be achieved? By applying the available mechanism into a proper way. Okay, so policy tell us what will be done, and mechanism tell us how that can be done. Okay, so are you beginning to see the difference between the two? So for a given mechanism, the policy could be different at different places. So there is an example. For example, we are having a mechanism called capability list, which will actually tells us that which user can access which resource, right? Now, policy at one location could be all the users on the system had read access to the file. Okay, so this could be one policy. Another policy could be, no one but the creator of the file has access of the file. Apart from the creator or the owner of the file, nobody else can access that file. Okay, so capability list is the mechanism, but how you are implementing it in achieving different goals, that depends upon the policy, right? Okay, now let's have a look at some of the design principles that will work when we talk about security. So one is a public design. Okay, so this is a design principle which says don't make your algorithm secret. Okay, so we have some, say, encryption algorithm. So don't make that encryption algorithm secret. Let people know about the algorithm, that this is how we are, this is how we are achieving the encryption of a data. Let them know. Okay, why, what is the motivation behind such design principle? Because anyhow bad guys will going to figure it out eventually. Even if you hide it from the bad guy, eventually they will come to know with the that this is the algorithm. Okay, and nobody else but those guys will know then how to stop it. So first design principle in making any type of mechanism, security mechanism, is just follow public design. Don't try to hide details from the adversary, because anyhow they will going to know them, and then they will definitely know how to contradict it or how to stop it actually, right? Make your algorithm difficult enough so that they will not break it. Let them know the algorithm, but it should be such that it is very hard to break that algorithm, or it requires lots and lots of resources to break the algorithm, which cannot be affordable by the hacker. Okay, so this is first design principle. Then, when we talk about the access mechanism, either you can give no access or you can give minimum privilege. Okay, so it is seen that minimum the principle of minimum privilege is much more convenient, because when you get no access, then people will start complaining that I cannot able to access this resource. It may be possible that they are the genuine users. Okay, so at that time they will not think that this access denied is due to the security reasons, but they think that I am a genuine user, I want to use the system, but I am not able to do this. Okay, so the design principle which deals with the minimum privilege is much more prevailing and a good design principle. Okay, and we have already discussed this in a bit detail. It actually gives users just enough access to accomplish the task, not more, not less. Okay, all right. Then we should try to keep the mechanism as simple as possible and as uniform as possible. Okay, why? Because if the mechanism is very complex, then there are high chances that it can lead to bugs. Even when you are implementing it as a policy, it is very difficult to implement if the mechanism is very complex, right? So try to make things as simple as possible, but along with this, also make sure to take appropriate measures. Okay, and what do I mean by appropriate measure? We have to make sure that what is the cost of the cost of hacking, right? So for example, if a hacker is having a machine, which is of a very high power, so what is the cost? Like, not many hackers will have that high power machine which can do the things. There may be very few hackers which can break it. Okay, so depending upon the cost of hacker, we are actually reducing the chances of our system to be get hacked, right? So for example, if we are having a limit of say password, we are keeping 8-digit password and only alphabets are allowed. Okay, so easily, there are many systems, which will easily try all possible permutation and combinations, which actually are possible with this particular setting, and definitely one of them will work. Okay, so we have to make sure that the cost of hacking is very high. Second point is, what is the cost if system is hacked? How much data loss we have to bear? Okay, so for example, if a hacker knows that if I hack the system I will not get any useful information, then generally if the rewards don't match the effort, system will be left alone, nobody bothers, right? If you know that this is a poor person, nobody will rob the house of a poor person. Why? Because they know we are putting so much efforts in robbing the thing, and we know that there will be nothing at that place. Okay, so when the rewards don't match the efforts, system will be left alone. Okay, so we have to take appropriate measures, or we have to make the mechanisms so that you know these things will be satisfied. So for example, if a system is hacked, all the data inside the system is encrypted. So it is of no use. Even if the hacker put so many efforts in hacking, ultimately no information is leaked. Okay, so it is of no use. So somehow the mechanism should be implemented in that manner. Okay. One mechanism is authentication, and almost all the system rely on identifying the user to enforce the protection. Okay, so I think whenever you are logging into your systems, or even a website, mail servers, everybody rely on authentication, right? So you actually can't, or any system cannot enforce any policy without knowing that who wants to access the system, because based on who wants to access the system, policy may differ, as we have already discussed, right? So suppose if admin wants to insert a system, then he is having some other access rights or policies that we had to enforce. If a normal user enter a system, then depending upon the user, there are different set of policies that are applicable to that users, right? So the first mechanisms that every system is having is authentication, and authentication actually identify that who are you, who wants to access the system. Okay, and the most commonly used authentication mechanism is login ID and password, and you might have encountered in each and every type of system you entered, you need to enter login name and password mostly, right? There are definitely other types of authentication mechanism. So some of them are like multi-factor authentication mechanism. Multi-factor means along with login name and password, system also needs some sort of captcha information, right? Or maybe some biometric characteristics to validate you, or there may be some challenge response type problem, like you will be getting an image and you have to click all the images which is having maybe a traffic signal in it, something like that, right? So along with a login ID and password, system require many other information. So that is known as multi-factor authentication. There are another authentication technique, for example, certificate-based authentication technique, where the user is identified based on the digital certificate or digital signatures of the user, right? There are some systems which have biometric authentication. So based on your biological characteristics, the authentication can be done. There are systems which are worked on token based authentication scheme, right? So for example, there are some systems which will send some sort of token on your email or mobile phone in the form of, let's say, OTP or something like that, and based on that authentication or verification can be done. There are different authentication cards which are available. So if you remember, in our college there are in previously the attendance can be taken through the ID cards. Okay, and on that ID cards there are barcode which contain all the authentication information about the user. Okay, so authentication can also be done using cards which is having barcodes, etc. Okay. So there are multiple ways of doing authentication, and it is the most popular mechanism which any system will apply as a first security mechanism in the system. Now there is one threat, which is known as root access threat. So there are many attacks such as rootkits attack, etc., which are actually nothing but a root access attacks, right? So so whenever a user is a root user or a super user or admin of the system, he is having almost all the capabilities or all the rights to access the system and the resources. So you have to be very careful whenever the program runs with the root access. It has the access to everything. Okay. And if that program is written by a hacker and he gets the root access, then what happens? Almost all the information that is required by the hacker will be in his hands, right? So we have to be very careful when the system is running in a root access mode, and therefore we have discussed earlier that generally the mechanism or the principle which are followed by the system is principle of least privilege, where the root access is given only when required. Once the task has been done, again the user switch to a normal user, right? So what can be done to prevent this? So there are authentication mechanism. Definitely we have to make sure that the user who is accessing the system or accessing, or the program that is accessing the resources, is a valid program, is a valid process, is a valid user. Okay, and login ID and passwords are first way to do so. So login name indicates who want to access the system, and password confirm the user who claims to be, right? So this is a critical things that you have to keep secret from unauthorized access. And you have to select a good password, because it is a critical information, because based on that information only your authentication is done. You can access the resources and all, right? Okay, so then we have second threat, which is known as brute force attack. Now brute force attack is actually dictionary attack. It is a way somehow in which hackers can crack the password. Okay, just try everything. Brute force means, so if we have to insert a password of, let's say, 5 characters, and only alphabets are allowed, then what hacker will do? Hacker will try all possible combinations that are possible through this alphabets with 5 letters. Okay, obviously one of them will hit, right? So based on that, the system can be cracked. How to mitigate this attack? So people try to increase the computational time of this attack. They would like to increase the computational cost of the attack. Okay, so how we can do that? So there may be some seconds of delay between two wrong guesses, or contiguous wrong guesses, or something like that. Okay, if you've seen that our mobile phones, if you draw a wrong pattern, or if we have entered a wrong pin, then maybe after 3 consecutive wrong pins, there is a 30-second of delay. Only after 30 seconds you can try again, right? So something like that. So in this way we are actually increasing the cost of we are actually increasing the timings of the attack, right? So if the timings are very high, then also it will demotivate the attacker to continue the attack. Other solution could be, we should not allow common words for a password. For example, when we write a password, generally what happen, it is easy that it should be meaningful, because it is easy to remember to the user also. Okay, So don't allow very common words as a password. So for example, generally the password could be test 123 or 1234567, something like that. Okay, so don't allow this common passwords. There are some systems, before accepting a password, they will run a cracker program. They will run a very small script which will actually try to crack the password based on some information, right? And if the password is cracked, the system will not allow the user to keep that password because it is very weak password, right? You have also seen some mechanism or some sites which will show that your password is very weak, please change it, this password is moderately hard, or this is very hard, something like that, this is a strong password. So definitely we should try to keep our password a little bit complex, combination of maybe capital letter, small letter, digits, special characters, alphabets. Okay, so you have to pay attention on your passwords. We cannot generate a random password every time because then it is difficult for a user to remember it. We cannot give two passwords to the user and ask him to switch between these two passwords, right? Because then it is not very secure. So the best way is to select a good password, which is a combination of many things, right? Okay. Now the next security threat is Trojan horse. So Trojan horse, this word is taken from a very well-known story where, there is a kingdom and the soldiers from a different kingdom has entered into, their enemy's kingdom in the form of horses. So they thought that they are nothing but some toy horses, but they are actually inside those horses. There are soldiers who are hidden inside those horses. Okay, so Trojan horses means the program looks like a genuine program and a good program, a very genuine program. So, for example, whenever we are inserting our credentials in the Gmail account, okay, so the sign-in page of Gmail, attacker can make a page which looks similar, exactly same to that particular page. Okay, and when we enter our login name and password, we get a message that you have entered incorrect ID and password. Even though you are inserting correct password, you will get a message that you have inserted incorrect password. Obviously, user may think that it might be happen that there will be some typo mistake. Okay, but what happened? Email login ID and password is sent to the bad guy, and we will and the program will exit and redirect us to a real login prompt. Okay, so next time when we insert the page, we will get access to our email account. Okay, but in between, what happened? Our credentials are sent to a bad guy. Okay, so it may be possible that this is a Gmail page or something like that, and it looks exactly same as our Google login page. When we insert username and pass, and even instead of maybe Gmail, they can write, instead of L, they can write 1. You think that it is written Gmail, but it is actually a numeric 1. Okay, to mislead the user. So there are attacks which follow these certain techniques or social engineering techniques to fool the genuine users. Okay, so for example, in this user print login, and the whatever name user will print will come into this name variable. Then we will do turn echoing off, means it will not, when the user insert password, it is not visible on the screen, and we will take password in a password variable. Then we will send a mail to bad guy sending name and password information, and we will print login incorrect and exit from this code. Okay, and then the genuine page will be loaded, right? So these are called Trojan horses. Means it looks like a genuine program, but actually it is a malicious program. Agents also. For example, it may be possible that a user will create a copy of ls file. Okay, if you remember, ls is a script file. Whenever you want to list a file in the directory in Unix, you will fire ls command. Okay, so there is a executable or script file of ls, right? So what user can do, user can write everything which is there in the ls file along with some malicious code, okay, and replace the original ls file. Whenever the genuine user will type ls command, the normal, normal thing will happen, but alongside some malicious code will also run. Okay, so in this way, it is dangerous, right? And the other way is to pretend to be a different computer and give false information to the user, right? So it may be possible that you are accessing some sort of what you can say, you are accessing some sort of website and you think that this is a genuine website, but actually it is a false website. Okay, so this could also be possible, right? Okay, now how to detect such type of attacks? So if a user is already known, for example, if if a user is known, okay, and I mean, if you want to see that whether the server is authentic or not, okay, is it the same system whom I am talking or not? In that case, apart along so we have already seen that system can um, have a challenge response along with the other authentication scheme to authenticate the user. But at the same time, user can also authenticate the system, user can also challenge the system, right? And the system have to give back a response verifying that yes, I am the one to whom you want to talk with. Okay, so the example I'm telling you about the Gmail server. So there are schemes which will actually ask the uh, system or the web server to authenticate themselves, so that to let the user know whether they are talking with a genuine server or not. Okay, and once we get a verification from the system, then only user will give their login information. Okay, and generally this is useful when we are dealing with remote computers. Okay, all right, more on this you will learn in your next course, that is on computer security. There are other security mechanism, which is known as set owner user ID. This is a very powerful software primitive which is provided, and it allows the user to change its identity temporarily. Okay, so identity changes to the owner of the program that is being executed. Once the program is executed, we will come again back to a normal user face. Okay, so whenever we are using such type of programs which actually do set UID sort of a thing, we should be very, very careful, because if that program is a malicious program and the control goes in the hands of a hacker or adversary, then he can do a terrible things to the system, because root is having almost all the access. Okay, so whenever this bit is set to the file, we have to be, or a program, we have to be very careful while using it. All right, so as an example, let's assume that there is this ls. So when we fire ls command, these are the two programs that are there, my program and mail program. The owner of my program is mattmcc, whereas the owner of mail program is root user. And if you can see in mail program, there is this s bit set. S bit means, this whenever somebody will use this program, he will temporarily get root access. Okay, so while running my program, we have to be very, very careful, the system have to be very, very careful, because if this program is malicious, then it can get for some time root access. Okay, so it might be possible that this is the code written in my program, So they will just try to fork itself, and when the zeroth index of the process will execute mail program, right? So mail program can access all the mail files, and those files can be transferred to mad tmcc user, right? So be very careful while making such types of program. Okay, now if I would like to conclude on the system threats that are there, so generally they can be categorized into four broad categories of attack. First is the interruption attack, which actually stop a user from getting the work done. Okay, so it is like denial of service attack, where at some particular point in time, maybe the server is fired with so many fake requests so that it cannot serve the genuine request. Okay, this is called interruption. You are stopping a user from getting some services, from getting the work done. There is another attack which is called interception attack. So in interception, what happens? Suppose Alice want to send some data to Bob. There is Eve in between who will read the data which is, which is in transit. Okay, so he will just read this data and get the information which he is not authorized to access. Okay, so these are called interception attack. Then we have modification attack, in which suppose Alice want to send some information to Bob. Maybe he says, I transferred $100 to Eve. This is the information he wants to send. What Eve can do, Eve can intercept the message, then he will modify the message. Suppose instead of 100, he will write 200, and then pass this information to Bob. So this is called modification attack. Okay, the integrity of data is not maintained. The data that is sent by Alice has been modified when it reached to Bob. Okay. Then there is fabrication attack. It is very much similar to Trojan horse attack that we have seen. Pretend to be someone else. Okay, pretend to be someone genuine, although it is a fake program or a fake server or a fake system. Okay. Now, if I have to talk about some specific attacks, so there are some trapdoor attacks. Now, what do you mean by trapdoor attacks? It actually deals with opening some secret entrance from the system. Okay, and through this secret entrance, malicious code can come inside the system, as well as some sensitive or private information can go out of the system. Okay, so for example, suppose compiler is a genuine program, and we are compiling the code, our source code using some compiler. It may happen that along with compiling the source code, it is also sending that source code to some command and control server or some remote server, right? And there is this famous Keynes-Thomson trapdoor compiler, which is actually involved in opening a trapdoor into the system when it is used as a compiler. Okay. Then we are having another attack called logic bomb attack. In logic bomb attack, what happened? A malicious program is set to go off at a certain time. So there is some malicious program which will remain dormant, okay, for so much time. It will be activated if and only if a certain condition match. Okay, so for example, ping a popular server at a specific time. So suppose there is an application submission and the deadline is at 5 p.m. Logic bomb will be dormant in the system until maybe 4:59 p.m. As soon as it is the end of and it knows that at this particular time there is the highest hit in the system, and with this I can reach to many other systems, something like that. Okay, so logic bombs are the program which will actually get activated at a particular certain time. Okay, they are triggered at certain time. Okay, and can do some damage. Trojan horses, we have already discussed. These are the disguise a bad program as a good one, right? And denial of service. So, for example, sending a lots and lots of message to a particular server until it is overloaded and can no longer respond to a legitimate request. Okay, legitimate means genuine request. Okay, unnecessary you are querying to a server without any specific job done. You're unnecessary pinging the server, so that due to the overload it cannot serve the genuine requests. Okay, this is called denial of service. Then we have viruses and worms, right? So viruses, what are viruses? These are the additional code which are added to the existing program, that we have seen that in ls file, along with the normal thing, there is some malicious code which is added to the existing program. This is called virus, right? And it causes this program to do something malicious. It is also capable to spread itself to other files which are executed or touched by this program. Okay, in this way it can spread itself, right? There is a very famous virus which is called Michelangelo virus. So Michelangelo was a artist, a very famous artist, and in, I think, in 1990s, there was there was a virus on his name actually, and it remained dormant for years and years, and one day, maybe for 3 years it remained dormant, and one day, by the way, this virus is related to a boot sector. It is a boot sector virus, and it is specifically made for DOS system. Okay, so at a particular date, when there is a birthday of this great artist, the virus get active, and it has damaged the boot sector of maybe thousands of systems all over the world. Okay, so it is a kind of a logic bomb, right? And this is a virus, yes. Okay. Then we have worms. So worms are standalone programs. So viruses are attached themselves with the existing program. On the other hand, worms are the standalone program, and they just try to repeat themselves into many, they just try to swarm themselves. You might have noticed when you are using Windows, it might happen that when you copy something from the pen drive, you just keep on opening the folder, and the same folder with the same name repeat again and again. When you open the folder, there is again the folder of the same name. When you open that folder, there is again the folder of the same name. Okay, so this is nothing but a worm, and it is a standalone program, and what it does, it actually uses tremendous resources of the system. It slows down the system. It acquires every sector of your disk. It will acquire all your memory. So basically it acquire your system resources. The main job of worm is to slow down your machine. Okay, and it spread very, very quickly. And the first worm which is distributed via internet is Robert Morris worm, okay, which is developed by this Robert Morris, who is studied at Cornell University, and he spread this worm from MIT. Okay, so yes, so this is about security. Okay, all right, thank you.